We own, of course, as you know, 80% or so of Mid-American Energy, which has a very large business in the UK, but that's an operating business. As you know, in the UK, there's a rule that requires reporting when you own 3% of a company's stock, and actually there's some conditions under which the ownership will be reported even sooner than that 3%. There's a provision that I think if there's an inquiry or anything that has to be responded to. So if you take a company with a market cap of 5 billion pounds, if we bought 150 million pounds of it, we would have to report, and that tends to mess up subsequent purchases. So we bought stock, we owned stock in Diageo, which was Guinness at the time. We've owned stock in some other UK companies, but we've thought twice before going over 3% because of the reporting requirements, and then we'd have to report if we were selling and all of that. So that's a deterrent, but it's not an overwhelming deterrent. And if we get a chance to buy a significant piece of something that we think is cheap, particularly if we could buy it in one purchase, but there are a lot of special rules that kick in over in the UK that do not in the United States. Incidentally, there was something in the journal the other day that said that we had to report if we bought over 5% of a company within 10 business days in the U.S. That is not true. That was a mistake in the report. But it is the case in the UK that at 3% reporting is triggered. But we would feel very comfortable with lots of UK businesses, and it'd be the same criteria we applied over here: a durable competitive advantage and a management that we like and trust, and a reasonable price. And we have seen some of those. There was an insurance company in the UK a year or so back that I would very much have liked to have bought, but we couldn't come to terms on price. But we have no bias whatsoever against buying business in the UK. And as I say, at Yorkshire and Northern Electric, we have a business that, as it shows in our report, made close to $300 million after tax. And actually, considering my views on currency, I'd give a slight edge to buying something where the earnings would be in sterling in the future rather than in dollars. Charlie?
Well, I regard it as kind of amusing that we ended up preferring the currencies of Europe when that's so much more socialized than the United States is. That's a queer occurrence.
You actually prefer them or not, Charlie?
Well, we certainly over a considerable period of recent months, we've actually preferred the currencies of socialized Europe to our own currency. I just regard that as an odd occurrence for both of us. That wouldn't have happened.
No. Up till 3 years ago, if I came back from Europe and I had a euro in my pocket, I couldn't wait to run to the bank or someplace. I was afraid it would depreciate before I could get rid of it. But I changed my views a few years ago. We hope to buy businesses and stocks other places in the world, and Charlie mentions the difference in political climate. One thing, you read about slow growth in Europe and Japan and all those, and it's true. But the growth figures that you see are usually not on a per capita basis. And since the population of Europe has been generally very little change, whereas the population of the United States grows 1 or 1.5% a year, if you look at growth figures in the United States and somebody says 3 and a fraction percent, that's not on a per capita basis. I mean, you have to deflate that by the growth in population. Whereas if you read about the growth in Europe, generally, you're dealing with a population base that hasn't changed. So the differences in growth rate on a per capita basis are not as wide as the headlines would suggest.
What obligation does